Should the Minnesota Vikings be worried about Sam Darnold? It was a great first 3 weeks and a great first half against the Green Bay Packers. And then things kind of started to fall apart a little bit. And against the New York Jets, he did not have a great day. But why didn't he have a great day? And I think the why is really, really important context when having this conversation. There are a lot of interesting things about his game from Sunday morning. And let's be real. It was Sunday morning, so we weren't exactly awake. I know I wasn't. Why? Because I was up watching Code versus Coke. If you know, you know. We're going to talk all about Sam Darnold. We're going to talk about should the Vikings be concerned. And we're going to talk about a lot more from Sunday's game here on the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner, he's producer Dave. I had to think about where I was pointing there for a second. It's been a minute. And I'm going to be honest with you. I just woke up from a nap. I am a little tired.
Watching too much film?
Watching too much football. Yeah, absolutely. For those of you that don't know, Code versus Coke was the Cal Miami game on Saturday night that lasted till 2 a.m. Central Time. So then I had to wake up at like 7 to start my pregame coverage. And, buddy, I have not caught myself up yet, but that's okay. Code versus Coke delivered in a big, big way. And shockingly enough, a offsides penalty, Dave, on an extra point ended up being the difference. An offsides penalty. Wild. Okay. Absolutely wild. But we're not here to talk about Code versus Coke. We're here to talk about your Minnesota Vikings, who are 5-0, and I expect them to be number one on quite a few power rankings. But it would not shock me if everybody who did have the one dropped them to 2, depending on how the Kansas City Chiefs play, because it wasn't a banner game for the Vikings. It was a good game. Don't get me wrong. The Vikings defense was tremendous. The offense had a lot of opportunities, and opportunities is going to be the key word that we use today because they did not capitalize on a lot of these opportunities. That Aaron Jones catch that actually ended up getting him hurt. I believe that's where he sustained that hip injury. You lay that out a few yards downfield, that's a touchdown. The Jefferson wheel route, where it was out a bunch, I posted that on my Twitter earlier today. You lay that out there, that's a touchdown. Jordan Addison had a deep crosser in the third quarter. You lay that out in front of him, he might be able to take that for a touchdown. Little nuanced details are honestly one of the biggest problems right now with the Minnesota Vikings, and it comes down to execution. It's not execution per se on the fault of the wide receiver. It's not execution per se on the fault of the offensive line, which I don't care what PFF says. The offensive line was pretty good. You also have to think about when you're watching the game live, you think, oh my gosh, the offensive line a lot of pressure. But it's hard to fully gauge offensive line play based on live viewing. Being that you were fellow offensive lineman, Dave, I'm guessing that you agree with me, as I can see your head nod up and down. One of the big things with offensive line play is you have to understand how long they're blocking. If somebody like Ed Ingram's been a very popular topic on this show for a lot of reasons. If you ask Ed Ingram to block for 5 or 6 seconds, it's okay if he loses. Blocking for 5 to 6 seconds is an astronomical task for any offensive lineman in the National Football League. One of the things with these Vikings route concepts is they're consistently taking 2.5, 3 seconds to come close to like anticipatory throws, where some anticipatory throws 1, 2, pow, like that quick, like Like if you're in shotgun, take your left foot, move it, right foot, plant, fire. Like that takes about a second and a quarter. With some of these deeper route concepts that we've become accustomed to the Minnesota Vikings playing, you have to have protection for longer because it takes a while to run 15 yards down the field and then do an in cut on a dig route on dagger. It takes time. And that's one of the things I think that kind of gets lost in translation with having some of these offensive line conversations. I don't say this because I'm always right. You guys know that I'm not always right. I'll never always be right. But one of the things that I try to do and try to be genuine about is always look at the film. Always look at all the data you can before digging your heels in. And one of the things I found is going to be our main topic for today, and that's Sam Darnold's performance against the New York Jets. One of the really difficult parts about understanding how the Jets fared, it's tough because I think Darnold's process was overall pretty good. And let's start here. The interception where he airmailed the ball over Jordan Addison's head, gets intercepted. The Jets end up, I believe they kicked a field goal or they scored a touchdown. I can't remember, but they got points off of it. That play was good process. And that's where some of these things can get lost in translation as well. Sam Darnold drops back. They're running a dagger concept. So you have Jefferson on the inside running the clear out, and you have behind him Jordan Addison running like an 18-yard dig on 3rd and 15. So it's going to take some time to develop. He has the time. He makes the right read. He's got a relatively narrow window. It's probably about 2 to 3 yards where he can get it in between, and Addison's in between like 3 defenders. Okay. He gets it in between that window. He makes the right read. He makes the aggressive throw. He just throws it 2 to 3 yards above Addison's head. That's the problem. It's not how he's going about his business. It's not how he's making some of these reads. He made the right read. And if that ball is just not airmailed quite as high, we're talking about like, man, what a freaking throw. 3rd and 15, and you just rip a laser in there in a tight window. That's great. Big time stuff. Problem is he airmailed it. And because he airmailed it, well, now we have a completely different view of what his performance was, Dave. It's a tough one. I also want to point this out. Justin Jefferson stunk on Sunday. And he stunk in context of Justin Jefferson. He was still good, but he played like a wide receiver 2 when he's the best wide receiver in football. So that there's a little context there. Balls that he should have caught, he didn't. He had a couple drops. He had one that almost turned into a Sauce Gardner interception on an out route. I don't know what it is. That man can't catch an out route right now. He had a couple against the Texans that he just couldn't bring in. Had a couple against the Packers, and he had a couple here. He's just off. It's almost like his equilibrium is just not all the way there. He even acknowledged that the offense played really poorly and the defense had to carry him post-game with Stacey Dales. It's a combination of a lot of things. And when you have Darnold missing guys, but then when he's hitting guys in stride, you got to catch it. And Justin Jefferson was not helping his quarterback on Sunday. And I think one of the big things is they just had a bad game. They found a way to win, and I think that's good. But we also need to understand, hey, why was it bad? And is that going to matter down the road? And that's why we're here. So we've kind of started talking about a lot of nuanced things here. We talked about that interception, which I think is a really, really important part of this conversation. We talked about Jefferson honestly having a very bad game. Dave, when I kind of start this conversation, on looking at the hypothesis, will this matter long-term for the Minnesota Vikings? What kind of vibes are you getting? What kind of feelings do you have toward this specific scenario?
Well, I think it is going to matter. I think this off week, this bye week, is probably one of the most important weeks for Kevin O'Connell and the offense going forward. They've got to fine tune and get things back on a better track.
Yeah.
Whether it be taking too long to throw long passes, waiting for stuff to set up, or throwing off target, or JJ not being JJ type of deal. There was the one throw to JJ where JJ had to hold up on the sideline and he got caught there. If he would have thrown it leading JJ, it would have been a touchdown. They seemed a little off. Now, whether it was the time zone change and the misty, wet weather that is England, and I can attest to that firsthand, it was a little different. But they did what was necessary to win the football game, and you've got to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And they did. But I think they're going to get it all back in line. Man Juice, thank you for that. Off topic, would we trade for Travis Etienne for a future pick?
I don't think the Jaguars are trading him. So at risk of sounding disrespectful, I don't even think we can entertain that conversation. I do think that they also did give him the 5th-year option, I believe. But I don't see the Jaguars in that position. They want to win. They've come really close in some of their 4 losses. I think that they're going to keep him. I also think they may want to keep him long term. I know that Tank Bigsby's kind of breaking out, but I don't see a scenario right now. And things could change in the next 4 weeks. But I don't see a scenario where ETN is available for trade. Plus, I don't think ETN is necessarily the kind of back that Kevin O'Connell's going to want. He's more of like a scat back, speed guy out of the backfield. Like, I don't see him as kind of like that Aaron Jones archetype. And I don't think that O'Connell would be interested. Like, good player, good talent, electric, but there's so much more nuance to the running back position. So I'm going to say no. Let's kind of talk about some of this process. And this is going to sound really, really weird, Dave. If Kirk Cousins is far right, Darnold is far left. You're looking at complete opposite ends of the spectrum here. And I'm not talking politics. I'm talking play style. Because one of the big things that we had an issue with Kirk Cousins was there's an unwillingness to whip the ball down the field, to fit it into a lot of those tight windows. And it was epitomized never better than 4th and 8 against the Giants in the playoffs. And you throw a 3-yard flat route to TJ Hawkinson instead of throwing deep. Darnold is kind of the opposite. He's seeing opportunities where Justin Jefferson's going to be in man coverage against single high, and he's checking into throwing it down the field. And he's checking into trying to make these big boy plays. Something Kurt Warner said, and I think is really important for quarterback play. It's okay to take a layup. You don't have to score a touchdown every single play. You don't have to get 30-yard chunks. They're great. If you can do it, hell yeah. But sometimes on 2nd and 10, if you get 8 yards, just take the 8 yards. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing saying that you can't also take the next step. There's so many layers to that conversation. There are so many. I think that nap was a mistake. My brain is crapping out on me right now, Dave. Yes, Hawk will make a big difference. But it's when something's open underneath. You don't necessarily have to fire things down the field. Now you can. And some of the things Drew mentions that the tight end was open all day. One of those plays was that Jefferson wheel route where Jefferson breaks open on a bunch situation. They create some traffic, which when you play a team that likes to run man coverage, you find ways to create traffic. Why? They'll spring your guys open. And they did a great job of that. But Josh Oliver was also wide open on a deep crosser on the other side of the field. And this is where understanding and watching the film can really help you quantify. Josh Oliver is the last option on this route. If Jefferson's not open, you throw it to Oliver. So it's not as simple as, hey, Oliver's open, why aren't you throwing to him? Because Jefferson was, and he's the first read. Those things matter too. But Darnold, I think, just wants to do a little bit too much. And Kevin O'Connell's guilty of this too. We talked about his play calling against the Green Bay Packers at the end of the game, where he wanted, like, it's almost like he wants to just put the knife in your throat, so to speak, where he's just trying to attack, and kill you down the field, when he could just run the ball and kill you instead. It's almost like he wants to be flashy instead of efficient. I think there's something to that here.
He says he always is hunting for explosives, explosive plays. And I think that's his mentality.
And I think to a point that's good, Dave. And we've seen how impactful it's been for this football team. But sometimes you got to calm down, understand the game situation, understand how well your team is playing. And especially when they have been running the ball really well, it's okay to just run the ball and be really successful at running the football. And there's a comment just a little bit ago how bad the running game was without Aaron Jones. I think there's so many different levels to that. One, Chandler did have a couple explosive runs. Both of them were called back by penalties. Two, Chandler couldn't get his feet set. That matters. That there was one Ed Ingram pass rush rep where he gets beat. He's trying to set his feet to anchor, and he does the splits. This playing surface wasn't very good, and that's not an excuse. That's not saying, hey, the Vikings couldn't run the ball because of this. Oh, I can't believe the playing surface was bad. Sometimes the playing surface is just bad, and you have to adapt and adjust. And the Vikings run game just could not do enough. And if your running back can't get traction, well, you're not going to be able to really sustain a run game. And I think that plays into it. I'm not in a panic mode about Ty Chandler. I don't necessarily think that you want to trust him with 25 runs a game. It'd be nice to have somebody else in the backfield. But I also don't think I'm necessarily paying a draft pick to go acquire a guy. Who are you going to bring in that somebody's going to be willing to trade away? We can have these ideas like a Travis Etienne. We can have these ideas. I even wrote a piece last year like, hey, the Vikings should trade for Saquon Barkley. We spent a lot of time talking about Saquon and Justin Jefferson on this show, Dave. But it's also kind of a pipe dream because it takes two to tango. And then if I agree that, hey, I'm the Vikings, I want to trade for, let's say, Travis Etienne, but the Jaguars just say, we don't want to. And then that's the end of it. There's really nothing you can do. There is the situation where, hey, I want to trade for Travis Etienne. The Jaguar says, sure, we want a third round pick. No, I want to give you a fifth. Oh. Well, that's part of it. You have to be able to not only find somebody willing to deal you a player, but then you have to agree. I do think that the Vikings could be active at the trade deadline, but I would expect that player, Dave, to be a defensive tackle, a defensive lineman. Defensive line has played very admirably, but if you can upgrade Jonathan Bullard and put Bullard into a rotational role, oh boy, you were cooking with gas. Especially if that guy's got pass rush juice. That sounds pretty great to me. So I think all these kind of factors play into why something happens. And to kind of wrap it all up in a pretty little bow, Chandler's got his warts. Delton said that he's pausing and looking for the hole. I think you have to be a little bit careful running some of the zone stuff, because when he's running gap stuff, if you're running counter, those toss plays, hey, you're hitting that C gap outside the tackle, buddy. Like, That's what you're doing. Okay. He's very good at that, and he accelerates quickly. So you might have to modify a little bit. Jones, they like running that mid-zone toss. But it's interesting because I do think Chandler, with his explosiveness, he is a good player. He's not the level of Jones. And the one interesting thing about explosiveness is if Jones makes the decision in 0.5 seconds, but Chandler makes it in 1 second, like Aaron Jones run like a 0.2 seconds slower 40. Well, now he's 0.3 seconds faster than Ty Chandler. So it's very interesting. But it's also one game on a bad playing surface. I'm not going to panic yet. I'm also, we're going to find out tomorrow afternoon when Kevin O'Connell has his presser. I'm not necessarily worried that Jones's injury is going to be a long-term thing either. So we'll see. We'll play it by ear. But the whole running game conversation stems from that aggressive nature that Kevin O'Connell has and that Sam Darnold has shown to have. It's great to be aggressive. It's great to want to create explosives. But it's also smart to be like, hey, live to fight another day. Hey, I see an 8-yard hitch route, wide ass open. I'm just going to take 8 yards. It's okay to do that. It is okay to take that shallow crosser instead of waiting for the dig to hopefully be open. Now, you don't want to always default to that, which is, I think, what Kirk Cousins was guilty of so much, where he wanted to just take the check down. He wanted to take the shallow concept. And by doing so, he wanted to like live to fight another day, but he didn't really want to fight to extend that vacation, so to speak. He didn't want to fight to extend it. He just wanted to fight it on a different day. There's a delicate balance there. And I think that's the biggest part of the process with Sam Darnold right now, Dave. If you only do the shallow routes, you're not going to be successful. If you only try to attack deep, you're not going to be successful. You have to find that balance. And it takes time. I do think somebody mentioned it, the return of TJ Hawkinson is going to help. Oh, yeah. Hey, I need 8 yards. Hawkinson, run wide choice. Okay. 15 yards later, first down. Like, that's why you pay Hawkinson an average of like $16 million a year. Why? Because you pay him that because you know that you can get 8 yards on wide choice whenever you please. But you also can't spam it. Because if you spam it, they're just going to know what's coming. And then they bracket you and it's over. So you have to find a delicate balance between aggressive and being conservative. There is a level. It's like we've talked about before. Don't mistake arrogance for confidence. There's a fine line where if you're too confident, you're just arrogant. You got to be careful not to cross it. It's kind of the same thing here. If you're on that line, figure out where it is. You got to figure out where it is. Okay, so this is interesting. David Rinaldi. If we can all figure this out, don't you think KOC has too? I just think Sam stinks at the shorty to intermediate stuff and they're hiding it. That's an interesting theory. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think Anthony Richardson for the Colts right now stinks at that short and intermediate stuff, but he might be the best deep ball thrower in the National Football League. It's bonkers. It's really, really wild how there's that kind of disparity. He can throw the short stuff. He can throw like a 5-yard speed out. He can throw a slant. He can throw a shallow cross. I don't think it's necessarily that he stinks at it. But that's a really interesting theory. My theory is this. He just wants to fire the ball down the field. He wants to create explosives. He wants to have that mindset. I don't think he can't do it, and I don't think that they're hiding it. I'm going to be real. Kevin O'Connell's not exactly calling a different game with Sam Darnold than he did with Kirk Cousins, than he did with Nick Mullins. He's calling what he wants to call. And you better deliver. That's the idea here. It's not, I said that in almost with like an arrogant tone, but that's not how I meant it. Kevin O'Connell believes in what he does, and he believes in you, and he's going to call what he wants, and he's not necessarily going to cater some of these little nuances to each individual player. They called mesh rail on that one play that Nick Mullins was in. And guess what Mullins does? He throws it to the back, and it's not in that instance of mesh. The back's not the first, second, or third, or fourth read. He's like the last read. Mullins like, screw it. I think Jones is going to cook him, and he did. Now, if he lays that 5 yards in front of him, that's a tutty. But that's where that aggressive nature, it stems from O'Connell. But it's okay to take the layup. And I think if Darnold really wants to take that next step, you got to take the layups. There were a couple that I wish he would have taken against the Jets, but his process is just really aggressive. And I think some of this needs to come during the bye week where, hey, we're going to scout ourselves. Sam, tone it down just a little bit, just a smidge. Because you extend drives, you can figure it out. And I think if the Vikings end up doing that, they could be in a much, much better place here moving forward. Like, just calm down a smidge on the aggressiveness. I'm not even saying a lot. Just a little bit. I think that could be a big difference here moving forward down the line. Because there's one thing to live to fight another day. And there's one thing like, hey, I want to win the war right now. Well, that was like Hiroshima. You don't have to drop the A-bomb. But you also don't want to retreat. Just find a middle ground. And I do think that Darnold, O'Connell, they've had so little time together. Not so much, so little. Because they've only been together since mid-March. They're still trying to figure each other out a little bit. It's not like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, where Bill Belichick and Tom Brady just had this ability to connect with each other, an ability to like understand what each other is thinking. Oh, Jason, that court date was actually supposed to be today. I haven't heard anything yet. I'm going to try to do some digging though. Yeah. Blowfish is that I actually think that's my desk and camera. It's at a tilt, not my jerseys. Well, maybe I could try straightening it. I don't know. I hung it. It's probably crooked. Let's be honest. I am not a handy person. Just ask my wife. She'll tell you the exact same thing.
No, I think it's the desk and the camera.
Yeah.
Because
I'll see what
the moon looks lining up with the corner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Plus, well, the one stinky thing about these cameras, Dave, is they move. When you have them set to track, that's when it gets all funky.
Mm-hmm. Well, then turn off the tracking.
Well, it is off right now.
Oh.
But it's still, in that weird kind of angle. None of you care about the backstage production stuff. But, all right. So that's kind of what I think about Darnold. Like I think there just needs to be a balance between the aggressiveness and willing to fight another day. It's okay to take a more shallow shot. It's okay to do that. This is great, Dave. Edwin, what a banger of a comment. What I like about Mullins is he gives me reason to crack open another beer. My friend, you never need another reason to crack open another beer, except the one you had was empty.
Mm-hmm. But Mullins is fun to watch because of the whole YOLO attitude. And he's going to gun it where he wants to gun it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Couple other things, because we're going to keep this a little bit short today for the sole fact that, hey, we got Monday Night Football. I got to cook dinner. But one of the things that I find interesting is the offensive line. We kind of talked about it earlier. I didn't think the offensive line was overall that bad. I thought Brian O'Neill was great. I noticed it during the games, and I was talking to some people. I'm like, Brian O'Neill was just cooking Will McDonald, their best pass rusher. Just cooking him. And I thought he was just whipping dudes' butts. I thought the interior had their moments where they were whipping butt. They got beat a couple times. The stunts that they were pulling were giving them some issues. Ed Ingram did blow picking up that one stunt, which Dave, as an offensive lineman, let me ask you this. Why is it so difficult for someone like Ed Ingram, when it's been a problem for so long, to pick up these stunts and see that they're coming? Why is somebody like that struggling with that specific instance? Is there any insight you can give?
I would say it's what he's looking at. He's focusing on, and in that case, the defensive end coming around, or the defensive tackle going to the outside. He's focused on the defensive tackle rather than engaging the defensive tackle and then having his eyes, his peripheral vision, seeing what else is going on and seeing that movement around him by the edge rusher. At that point, he should have disengaged. He should have saw it. And I don't think he sees it.
So here's my theory. And I think it kind of aligns with what you're saying. So I've got the play pulled up on my computer right now. It's almost like I think Ed Ingram bends just a little too much at the waist, and it hinders his vision. Because I've seen that quite a few times where he kind of just bends over because he wants to like just drive you. And you know the saying, low man wins. Well, he wants to drive you in here. And when he tries to push you in here, he wants to get low so he can like jack you up a little bit. And I mean that in the literal sense, like push you up like, you know, those sleds where you get underneath and it just pushes it way high. So I think when he does that, he gets his eyes a little too low and it's harder for him to see the full picture. I don't know how that gets fixed. I don't know technique wise what you would do. But I do think that that's something, it feels correctable. But at this point, is it correctable? Because we're now in year 3, where it's still the same issue. I think Ed Ingram's been unfairly charted this year by PFF. I don't think he's been nearly as bad as the PFF charting has said. I also think the PFF charting has been wild this year for some of these pressures. I'm sorry, Aiden Hutchinson does not have 40 pressures in 4 games. He just doesn't. Jonathan Grenard is tied for second in the league in pressures, which I find interesting, in 29. I feel that number is relatively accurate because of how insane he's been getting to the quarterback. But I do think some of these things, Dave, are a little interesting. I actually think the offensive line's pretty fine on an overall level. You could have better players in the interior for sure. You have your stud tackles, but you have to find a way to cut corners and moneyball somewhere. And I do think that how they've constructed the interior is good enough. It will cause problems, but they're workable ones. And they haven't been degenerative problems yet. Like Dalton Risner to me is a non-starter. I don't think that he's, 1, good enough to be a starter on this offensive line. 2, I also don't think the Vikings think so either. Based on everything that they've said and done so far. Plus, I don't even know if Dalton Risner is going to play this year. He's still out with that hamstring. Dave, it's been 2 months. And there's no timetable that's been given to us by Kevin O'Connell that he's going to be coming back anytime soon. We do know Gabriel Murphy is still on a little bit of a longer timeline as well. That all came when he updated us on TJ Hawkinson last week. So overall,
you're thinking Dalton has a hammy? I thought he had a back issue.
I thought it was a hamstring. Maybe it's a back. Whatever it is, it ain't good. Because it's still causing him issues. Like, I personally don't think, like, if you have Ed Ingram and you have Dalton Risner, I don't see a world where you start Risner over Ed Ingram. I really don't. Risner cannot drive block. He cannot run block at all. Ed Ingram's very good at it. And he's improved enough as a pass protector to where he's not like, it's not like 2 years ago where they were sending blitzes and everything right at him and he was just messing up. they still, try to attack him with stunts. And he's missed, like, I want to say it's 2, maybe 3 stunts so far this year that have just been like, all right, dude, come on. And one of the tough parts about offensive line is if you have like 2 really bad plays a game, that's like, that can crater your football team. It's not like another position where if you have 2 bad plays a game, offensive line is a really bad one to have 2 bad plays.
Mm-hmm.
For where we're at right now, Ingram's fine. And I think some of the PFF charting on him this year has been objectively bad. He's had some rough reps, but I severely don't agree with it. And people in my mentions like to say, just admit he's bad. Well, he has to be bad first. And he just hasn't been. He's been fine.
Not as good as I want, but I do think he has a peripheral vision issue where he's focusing on the guy he's blocking and not seeing movement behind or paying attention in it, that it's keying that, hey, I need to see what's going on. Not only am I blocking, but I'm also head sort of on a swivel watching around who I'm engaged with.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that can be fixed. I don't know if it's a vision problem.
I don't know if they could stick them in front of a computer that flashes stuff off on the sides. I don't know. I really don't know.
I don't know either.
Flash pads in front of his face or something.
Send him to Dave & Buster's to play Fruit Ninja. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No. But I'm thinking like whack-a-mole, where you're constantly different pop-ups.
So it's kind of the same thing, but it's those touch pads. So if you ever go to a Dave & Buster's, they have like touch pads on the side and they flash light, and then you gotta do that thing. It's fun. My wife loves playing it, and it's cool watching her because she gets like really into it and like competitive. I'm like, hell yeah, this rules. But yeah, somebody said either in this chat or somewhere else that they should target Trey Smith next offseason. I think that would be a cool idea, but is Kwesi Ovamensa going to want to pay $20 million to a guard? I don't think so. I really don't. I think we're going to be living in this world where we're going to have average guards and an average center and elite tackles. And I think that's the world we're going to live in. That's my theory. Because we haven't seen him try to like pay a guard big money. It could have paid Ezra Cleveland relatively big money, but they chose not to. Like Ezra Cleveland right now is making average of $9.5 million a year. Dave, that's what the entire interior of this offensive line is making a year. Average annual value. Blake Brandel 3.5, Garrett Bradbury 5.5 or 5.25. No, Brandel's not even 3.5, 3.16, 5.25, and then like 1.5. Like that's your entire interior is Ezra Cleveland. So I'm going to be really intrigued to see how they kind of parse all that out, but we'll see if they choose to do anything during the offseason. But right now, I think you're looking at a team that just needs to kind of work out some of the aggressiveness issues that they have. They're not necessarily issues, but I think they could tone it down just a little bit and play smarter. They're playing hard and they're playing relatively smart, but I think they could be just a little smarter. If they do that, Dave, we could be in a great spot moving forward because this team is 5-0. And although we've talked a lot about issues, this team's 5-0. Like, that rocks. They're figuring things out as things progress, as they keep winning games. And they're learning lessons in losses. In wins, not losses. That rules. That's great. I love it. Lastly, they need to figure something out with this punt coverage unit. They made a ton of mistakes. Special teams make special teams. Do you want to be good special? or bad special. You can't keep making mistakes. The Jalen Naylor muffed punt against the Packers, I'm going to chalk up as like you had the backup in. It was a really sunny day. Okay, that's kind of a one-off. We haven't seen anything since. Caleb Evans gets pushed into Brandon Powell, which is perfectly legal. You can't directly interfere, but you can push somebody into him. That's a workaround. And then you know what they did? The Jets kept trying again and again and again, and it almost worked a couple times. Jay Ward had an illegal block in the back 10 yards behind Brandon Powell. You can't be dumb and make that play. That was a big reason why the Jets had great field position when they scored their touchdown before the half. Because it put the Vikings inside the 10. They kicked from about the 5. You can't do that. It's the bye week. They have time to figure these things out. They have time to adapt, adjust. And what's really cool is people are talking in the chat about how long the Vikings have trailed this year. The Vikings haven't trailed since the first quarter against the New York Giants. And that was because of a CJ Ham fumble.
Yeah, 3 minutes, 26 seconds.
The teams are, Dave, listen to this. The teams around them that also started 5-0 that had low times of trailing won the Super Bowl, lost the Super Bowl, lost the Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl, lost the Super Bowl. The top 6 teams to start 5-0 with having a total amount under 4.5 minutes where they've trailed, they've all made the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Ooh, buddy. Get excited. Get excited.
Hey, keep your fingers crossed.
Keep them crossed big time. And that is going to be our show tonight. Thank you guys very much for joining. Overall, I think Darnold just needs to play more within himself and not try to create explosives on every single play. I think if you tone it down just a tiny bit, you're going to see a big time growth from this football team. And I'm really excited about that. I think the Vikings could be a Super Bowl champion if they continue to play like this. This defense is getting historically great.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting historically great. That's why I think the Vikings, I'm going to try and identify some players because I think this might be the time where the Vikings try to make a TJ Hawkinson type move. Acquire a guy who can help them now, who they'll give an extension to later. Like a defensive tackle?
Mm-hmm. One from the Giants?
I think Dexter Lawrence costs too much. I think you're looking at a first and a third minimum.
But, God, I would love to have Dexter Lawrence on that line.
Oh, my God. Dexter Lawrence on that line would be incredible. Oh, I would salivate. That would turn this defense into an elite unit. I wouldn't care if you gave up 2 first-round picks if you had Dexter Lawrence here long-term. The amount of damage he could do for you is astronomical. It takes your defense to an entirely different level.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I may write about that tonight because I'm bored. So I'm gonna take a look at that and try to figure out what it might cost. I think 2 first-round picks is a starting discussion point, and then it might go down a little bit from there. We also have to figure the Vikings don't exactly have a lot of draft capital. That's why there's that viral clip from Score North going around where Stephen B asked about what if you trade JJ McCarthy for Dexter Lawrence? And then I think Phil was like, well, you probably have to throw a second in with McCarthy to get Lawrence, which I think he's right because McCarthy's a completely unproven 10th overall pick. And Dexter Lawrence this might be a top 3 defender in the National Football League. So I think it's interesting. I'm going to write about it, Dave. I'm going to write about it. And we'll talk about it on Wednesday. Wednesday, we're going to talk a little bit more about the defense. And we're going to talk about like projecting forward to the trade deadline. It's going to be a good time, guys. It's going to be a really good time. Enjoy 5-0. I am going to be out of town this weekend, going up to the North Shore. Look at the fall colors I don't understand why people do this, but I think I'm going to because I've told it's very cool. So I'll have an understanding when that is done. And hopefully my wife doesn't get mad at me when I watch Florida, Tennessee on my phone. But alas, we'll have fun. Sal will hopefully be back tomorrow night. I think we've got all the production issues with her new studio sorted out, which is great. I will be back Wednesday night. There will be multiple things on the podcast feed. I may even do some podcast only stuff. Ooh. So I'm with my A to Z contract. I can only do certain things for the YouTube channel. So I can't do short shows for the YouTube channel, but maybe for podcast, who knows? Mess around, send Dave a file and be like, "Hi, Dave, here you go." Hey, anything to create more work for our 61-year-old producer. Hey, it was Dave's birthday yesterday, if you didn't know. And if you want to send him a bottle of bourbon, maybe we'll get you like a PO box or something so we can get you some good stuff from across the country. I don't want to give away your address. That would be doxing and weird. I actually don't even have your address, and you and I have worked together for years. But if you want to get Dave a bottle of bourbon, we'll figure out a way to do that. In the meantime, don't forget, 2 Old Bloggers, Darren hopefully will be back this week. That sneaky butthead going to Nova Scotia to sell a house. Let me tell you. He's like, "Oh, I had to sell a house." Come on.
Well,
Darren.
It's been a few years since they left and went to Yellowknife. So it finally sold, which is good. I'm happy for him. He can get back up to Yellowknife and back to the snow. Good for him.
Good for him. I'm still going to give him all the shit, and he deserves it. And we love Darren.
And Who Will Be King will be broadcast on Thursday this week over on the Kittens channel, Bleachers to Speakers. They're hosting this week, and it should be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I found a way to get you a bottle of bourbon. Everybody just needs to directly send me money. Well, because then I can coordinate it. We don't have to give random people your address. You can trust me with your address. I trusted you with mine.
Yeah.
That would be the easy way. But we'll figure it out. In the meantime, wish Dave a happy birthday. Let's get him some bourbon. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. This is Odie. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!